Welcome to Falcon Times. Today we bring you a deep dive into the escalating debate between Europe and Washington over how best to confront Russia's ongoing war in Ukraine. A coalition of European leaders has been working tirelessly to convince U.S. President Donald Trump that Russia has no real intention of ending its war in Ukraine. The message is clear: Moscow will not stop until it is forced to stop. Diplomacy has failed, ceasefires have collapsed, and Vladimir Putin only understands pressure. For the first time since the invasion began, Trump has signaled that he is prepared to turn up that pressure. But while agreement on the principle is important, agreement on the method is proving far harder to achieve. European leaders want new sanctions, a 19th package designed to cut off Russia's financial lifelines, choke its banks, and hit the sprawling networks of oligarchs who channel money into the Kremlin. They believe that only by freezing assets, blocking trade routes, and restricting financial transactions can Moscow be weakened to the point of serious negotiation. The Trump administration, by contrast, is leaning toward tariffs, a tool the president favors. His officials argue that tariffs on Russian energy, metals, and exports can drain the Kremlin's war chest more quickly and give Washington leverage without tying America to slow and complicated multilateral sanctions. This difference in philosophy lies at the heart of the current challenge. Sanctions are targeted but complex. Tariffs are blunt but fast. Sanctions work best when coordinated across many allies, but require long enforcement and monitoring. Tariffs can be imposed by executive action and adjusted rapidly, but their cost is often shared by domestic consumers and industries. The question facing both sides of the Atlantic is how to reconcile these two approaches. Over the past week, a flurry of diplomatic visits has taken place. Senior EU officials flew to Washington to meet their American counterparts. Treasury experts and trade negotiators worked late into the night to draft potential compromises. Technical teams reviewed spreadsheets of trade flows, financial transactions, and loopholes exploited by Russia. The details are complicated, but the underlying urgency is simple. Every day without coordinated economic action is another day for Russia to fund its war. Meanwhile, the war on the ground continues. Ukrainian soldiers hold their lines under constant attack. Civilians endure missile strikes, power outages, and shortages of food and medicine. Entire towns are scarred by years of bombardment. The need for Western unity is not abstract, it is measured in lives lost each day. For Europe, the urgency is especially close to home. Millions of Ukrainian refugees are living across EU states. Energy prices have spiked, straining households and industries. The political mood is fragile, with extremist parties using the war and its economic costs to fuel discontent. For the European Union, finding common ground with Washington is a matter of survival, not just strategy. For Trump, the calculation is more political. Tariffs are a familiar tool, one that allows him to claim he is both punishing Russia and protecting American industries. They fit neatly into his America First rhetoric. Sanctions, on the other hand, require patient coordination, and patience has never been his hallmark. Yet history shows that sanctions, when truly multilateral, can crush an economy. Iran, in the early 2010s, was forced to negotiate because coordinated sanctions cut it off from global finance. South Africa in the 1980s faced international isolation until apartheid crumbled. But both examples also show that sanctions take time, consistency, and unity. This is what worries European officials. Trump may be on board today, but will he remain committed tomorrow? Will tariffs distract from sanctions? Or will tariffs and sanctions together form a double strike on Moscow's economy? The idea of combining them is appealing: sanctions on banks and oligarchs from Europe, tariffs on exports from the United States. Together they could close loopholes and drain revenue. But it requires trust and careful coordination, qualities not always abundant in transatlantic relations. Even within the European Union, divisions remain sharp. Hungary continues to resist the harshest measures, citing dependence on Russian energy. Austria and Slovakia hesitate. Poland and the Baltic states demand uncompromising action, arguing that anything less is appeasement. These internal splits make consensus difficult, even before negotiating with Washington. Across the Atlantic, U.S. business lobbies are sounding alarms. Manufacturers fear tariffs on metals will drive up costs. Energy companies worry about volatility. Within Trump's own team there are differences of opinion, some backing his instinct for tariffs, others pushing him to accept coordinated sanctions. Russia, of course, watches all this closely. The Kremlin thrives on delay, division, and hesitation. Every disagreement in Brussels, Every debate in Washington buys Moscow time. Already Russia has rerouted much of its trade through China, India, and Turkey. Entire networks of shadow companies launder money and move goods across borders. Sanctions leakage remains a major problem. Without airtight enforcement and cooperation, Russia finds ways to keep the war machine running. For this reason, European diplomats emphasize urgency. They know each sanctions package grows more complicated than the last. They know tariffs could backfire if not carefully targeted. And they know Putin calculates that the West will tire before he does. Whether that calculation proves true depends on whether Europe and America can act together. What happens next is uncertain. Negotiators hint that a joint package blending sanctions and tariffs may soon be announced. Perhaps Europe will freeze more banks and oligarchs while America imposes tariffs on energy and raw materials. This twin approach could strike at the heart of Russian revenues. But uncertainty hangs over the process. Trump is unpredictable, capable of changing his mind quickly. European leaders fear he could abandon talks or use them as leverage in unrelated trade disputes. And yet, despite the risks, the fact that Trump is even aligned with Europe in principle marks a turning point. For the first time since the war began, both sides of the Atlantic are moving in the same direction. The question is whether they can stay the course. The stakes are immense. Ukraine's survival depends on Western unity. Russia's economy, though weakened, remains resilient enough to fight on unless truly cut off. The credibility of the transatlantic alliance itself is on the line. If the West can align tariffs and sanctions into a coherent package, Putin may be forced to the negotiating table. If they fail, the war will drag on, more lives will be lost, and Russia will continue to test the resolve of democracies. This is the hard part. It is not about speeches or promises, but about whether leaders on both sides of the Atlantic can overcome divisions and act decisively. Trump has finally signaled he is ready to squeeze Russia. Europe has prepared its toughest sanctions yet. Now the question is whether words can be turned into united action. The outcome will shape not only the future of Ukraine but the stability of Europe and the credibility of America's global leadership. Only time will tell.